Welcome to the Writer's Journey podcast. I'm Michael Laran, a science fiction and fantasy author on a journey to go from nobody to bestseller, and I'm documenting every step of the way. Tune in every week as I pull back the curtain on my writing life and how I'm building a writing career while working a full-time job, raising a family, and attending law school classes in the evenings. You can find show notes for this week's episode, a free starter library of my fiction, and much more at michaellaran.com.
Hello and welcome to episode 135. 135 is a good number, and we are in week 10 of my Beast Mode Diaries. And I titled the name of this episode Wandering, because I'm going to talk about a type of book that I've been writing that is interesting, and some folks on my YouTube channel had asked me to talk a little bit more about it, and so this is kind of the test run before I do a video, so I'm kind of gathering my thoughts. But before we get into that, announcements. So I have a lot of announcements this week, just heads up. Seems like everything gets hit at once. So first things first, I participated in a Twitter chat with Tim Lewis at the Alliance of Independent Authors, ALLI, and we were talking about mental models for writers. And so I've never done a Twitter chat before. It was a really interesting experience. And so a lot of people were asking me questions about mental models, what they are, what some of the most common models are. And there's a summary post that kind of compiles all of the greatest hit tweets. And I'll put a link to it in the show notes. So you don't have to go to Twitter to look at everything. It's kind of crazy to to read everything on Twitter. It might be a bit of a sensory overload. It definitely was for me when I was doing the event. But Tim did a good job summarizing everything, and you can look at that in the show notes if you are so interested. And if you are interested in checking out my book, Mental Models for Writers, 73 Ways to Improve Your Writing, Elevate Your Thinking, and Capture Success, then check it out at authorlevelup.com/mental models. All right, so next announcement is I did a guest blog interview. You know, I don't do these very often, usually because I don't get asked, but I actually wrote a guest blog interview. So it's at the Dark Neon blog, and that's run by Hugh Collingborn. And Hugh sent me over a bunch of questions, and I typed up my responses, and you can read those. And it was a kind of a wide-ranging interview. We talked about fiction writing, we talked about productivity, and check out his blog. He's interviewed a fair number of successful self-published authors, so I'll throw that in the show notes as well. And next announcement is that this weekend is the weekend I'm speaking at the GDEX Gaming Conference, and it's virtual. And I'm speaking there this weekend. So if you are into video games, if you're into cosplay, if you're into esports, this is your conference. And the best part about it is that it is 100% free. This is normally held in Columbus, Ohio, downtown at the Convention Center. And it's one of the largest conferences in Ohio, at least I think. And because of the quarantine and all that, they weren't able to have the event in person, and so they're doing it free virtually. And so there's going to be a lot of really big name companies represented there. So like Valve is sponsoring some of it. So it's pretty legit. So you can register for free and sign up at thegdex.com. That's THE, G as in George, D as in David, E as in Edward, X.com, the GDEX. And I'll drop a note in the show notes as well, or a link in the show notes. And I am speaking on how to, it's more for readers. It's like a blend for readers and writers, but I'm speaking on how to write engaging characters. So a lot of the stuff that I talk about on my YouTube channel, kind of bundle it up, and we're going to have some fun. And I'll be available for a Q&A session after the chat, and I'll have a chat with the moderator as well. So I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a good time. All right. So the next announcement, and this is an announcement that I know a lot of you have been waiting for. I have set the date and the time for the next Writing Power Hour. All right. Actually, the next 2 Writing Power Hours, but the next one, I'll announce it. So the next Writing Power Hour will be October 24th, Saturday at 11 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. So Saturday, October 24th from 11 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. Again, apologies to my friends across the pond. I will make sure to do a late night power hour or something at some point with you all, so we can have some fun. But mark your calendar, and I'll be doing another power hour with Dale Roberts on November 7th. So we got 2 power hours coming at you fast and quick. I wanted to make sure that I announce it to give people enough time to get ready for it. One of the things I want to do is set a monthly date so that you kind of know, okay, it's the whatever Saturday of the month, we're going to do a power hour. I'm not going to do that yet, mainly because once we get out of October, November and December are kind of crazy. So one thing I don't want to do is I don't want to start to set a regular schedule and then the holidays hit and all that. So I'll be doing one in October, one in November, and one in December, probably very early in December. And then starting in January, it'll probably be the first Saturday of the month. And then we'll get on a regular rotation at that point. So bring your own manuscript. We'll have some fun. Bring your questions, any self-publishing questions or writing questions you have for me. I'm happy to answer those, and we'll have some fun, and we'll continue the theme of the last power hour. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a lot of fun. All right. So those are the announcements. See, told you I had a lot of announcements. So wins for the week. Actually, it was a surprising win. So my wife got me a new planner. So it was our anniversary last weekend, and she got me a new planner, and I was surprised because it was the Full Focus Planner by Michael Hyatt. So if you don't know who Michael Hyatt is, he was the former CEO of Thomas Nelson Publisher, a very large publisher. He's turned into a motivational speaker, and his big thing is productivity and being mindful and thoughtful about all the decisions you're making in your life. And I really have enjoyed Michael Hyatt over the years. He's given me some really good advice. And so who knew that my wife would get me a Full Focus Planner? So it was actually right on time because it's time for me to start doing my 2020 planning. And so I've been breaking in the planner and trying to figure out the best way to use it and doing some of the goal setting exercises in it. And it's worked pretty well so far. So it's a kind of a great next layer to add into my morning routine. So I consider that a win because anything I can do to be more organized in my life, I think is always a win. And especially as we get into 2021, it's time for me to start doing planning. So I've been doing budgeting. I've been doing what my strategic priorities are going to be for 2021 and all that good stuff. And so the planner was a welcome gift from my wife. So very good gift. So lesson learned this week. I mentioned last week that the plates were shifting, that I'm getting ready to start writing fiction. Now, I'm not there yet, but I have been reading some novels lately. And so one of my favorite authors is Arthur Haley, British author, huge name back in his day. He was very, very popular in like the 60s and 70s. And Arthur Haley wrote these great thriller novels. And like one of them was called Airport. And it is a thriller that takes place in an airport. It's kind of like the weirdest, funniest. I shouldn't say it's weird or funny, but it's unique. So the main characters are people who work in the airline industry, and they're trying to stop a terrorist from hijacking a plane. I'm reading a book now called Hotel, and it's a thriller that takes place in a hotel. And all the main characters are workers in this hotel. And what I learned from Arthur is he has this just great way of creating a setting and making the setting an ecosystem. When I read his books, that's kind of what I think of, because like in this book Hotel I'm reading right now, there's the general manager, and then there's the assistant manager, and then there's the manager of the bellhops, and then there's a guy that is in really well with the owner, and they're all kind of living in this hotel and dealing with this crisis as it's unfolding, and you're getting their perspectives as they're wandering around, carrying out their responsibilities in the hotel, and also figuring out what's going on with some of the issues that are going on in the hotel. It's just such an interesting way to think about your setting. Even if you don't do a setting like a hotel or an airport or something like that, something so specific, it's so interesting to think about a setting and then people and characters in it playing roles. Like, what are their roles? And then what also makes Arthur Haley so great is that he's a master at switching between the different characters. So one chapter you get the general manager, and then the next chapter you get one of the guests, and then the next chapter you get the bellhop. And it's so interesting how he does it, and it builds tension. So switching between all those characters, carrying out their responsibilities as each one unpeels a different layer of the issue, I think is a really interesting lesson. And it's something that I really want to try in my fiction one day. I think I already do it in a way, but I don't think I've ever been intentional about it. So maybe one day I'll write a story that is similar to Haley's in a way. So idea of the week. This is similar to an idea that I proposed in my book, Indie Author Confidential, Volume 1. I think it was in Volume 1. If not, it's in Volume 2. I don't remember. But the idea was, so, okay, let me just back up. Wouldn't it be interesting? Let me back up again. Okay, I got to get myself together here today, Michael. All right, so virtual assistants. Virtual assistants are expensive for most authors. I think that's a known fact. I mean, if you're writing your first novel, you're probably not hiring a virtual assistant. I mean, hell, I've got 50 books, and I still don't have a virtual assistant for my author business. Like, I've got a video assistant, but I don't have a virtual assistant because they're expensive. And they help you with a number of different things. But what I found as an author is that virtual assistants are great, but I don't necessarily have enough work for them to work 40 hours a week or even 20 hours a week. It's kind of a ad hoc, hey, go do this, or hey, go do that. I don't think I would have enough to fill their day, to be honest with you. And so I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if a bunch of authors got together and pulled their resources and hired one VA that serviced multiple different authors? So if you've got author A and author B and author C, between the two of them, they probably could fill the VA's day, and the VA would just flex and adjust to the styles and the skills or the needs of each author. I think that could be a really interesting idea, and especially if you have a VA helping you with emails and customer service support and things like that, where you can set them up with an email address and it looks like they're your own dedicated VA. The readers and people on the other end of the email don't know that you're sharing the costs of a VA. I think that could be an interesting author business as well. There's businesses out there called like OK Relax and I think like TaskRabbit, where you can hire from a pool of VAs to do just a one-off task. That doesn't work. The problem I found with VAs is that there are very few dedicated author VAs. Like, running an author business is completely different than running your regular run-of-the-mill internet business. And I shouldn't say run-of-the-mill, but we're just different. We're just different. And your average VA is not going to be able to probably help us at the level that we want. And so it would be interesting if you had a dedicated VA that could help a pool of different authors. I think that could be interesting. So I call this a author VA cooperative. Now, you could also do this with IT as well. So every once in a while, there are IT expenses and things that come up. Like, for example, maybe there's a problem with your WordPress site and you can't figure out what it is. Or maybe you get hacked. Or maybe you need to install some sort of plugin that needs some customization. Or you need to install a WordPress theme that requires a bit more technical expertise than you have. Wouldn't it be interesting if you could do the same thing with IT? And they would provide that WordPress support or that email support, whatever that is, to help you. I think that's an interesting concept, because VAs for most authors are not affordable. But if you pooled your resources, you could reduce the costs and still get a VA experience that would help the authors save time, right? So anyway, that is an idea. Take it if you would like. So what I wanted to talk about for the topic of the week is, I titled this episode Wandering. All right, so we're still in beast mode. And my newest book that I'm writing right now is a really weird roller coaster ride. I haven't written any book quite like it. And I was talking about it on my daily blog, And if you don't know, I'm blogging now, authorlevelup.com/blog. And I was talking about it, and I mentioned that it was a very wandering book. And someone had asked me, what do you mean by that? What do you mean that it's a wandering book? Can you expound on that a little more? And so what I wanted to talk about this week was what that means and how I'm dealing with it. Because the more books you write, I imagine that you're going to come across a book that is going to be very similar for you. And the first time it happens, it's kind of weird to write a wandering book. And so I just want to talk about my experience with it and how it's going. So I'm writing a book right now, and it's called I'm tentatively calling it Project Author Income. And really what it is it's a book that recaps a lot of the database experience that I developed earlier this year. So, earlier this year I dedicated like 5 episodes to it. I did an author book database where I learned how to condense all my sales into one place so that I could run reports and get insights into them and all that stuff. I won't rehash it because you've heard it about 10,000 times. So I decided to compile all of that learning into a book, and that book have it be a treatise or a manifesto on what a tool like this should look like for the community. Because I've tried to build it, but it's too much for me. I don't want to be in the business of software development. And I kind of said I would do it, and then I said I wouldn't. And every time I walked down the path, it was a bit too complicated and more than I wanted to take on. So if there is a developer out there or someone who is looking for a problem to solve who has this skill set, the book is a blueprint to what this tool should look like, what features it should have, and what types of things that authors should be thinking about when they think about this problem. Because authors, when we think about our sales reports, we think about it as a data entry problem. Oh man, I got my KDP reports, I got my Kobo reports, I got to put all those sales into a spreadsheet, or oh man, I got to figure out a way to get all these things compiled together. And it usually involves taking data from one spreadsheet and putting it onto another spreadsheet. So most authors, and I know this because I've talked to a fair amount of people about this, they are handling this as a data entry problem. This is not a data entry problem. This is a data problem. Okay? So that is the core message of the book. And we have to stop thinking about it as a data entry problem. And when we think about it as a data problem, that's half the battle. And so when you understand that this is a data problem, you start asking different questions. How do we solve data problems? What are the tools that we can use to solve data problems? How can we employ them in a way that we can automate this problem? How can we become data stewards? All right. So anyway, that's what this book is about. It just compiles all that information into a pretty bow for anyone who is wanting to think about this problem differently. It will give you the basic knowledge to start working on this yourself if you wanted to do it. But first and foremost, most people are not going to want to do that. It really is just a manifesto, so to speak. It's me throwing this out into the universe. I know it's not going to be a book that sells very well, but I'm still writing it anyway because I think it's important. And one of the things I think it's important is that when we, as a community, we often have tools built for us. And the great thing is that we can offer feedback on those tools. But those tools don't always solve the problem 100%. And so I feel that as indies, we have to start communicating to developers and entrepreneurs and folks who have the skills and the will to build tools for the community. We have to start telling them what we want. And this is the example of a tool that solves a problem that everybody in the writing community has. Everyone has this problem. I don't care who you are. You just may choose not to deal with it. You may have a Band-Aid solution for it, but that's going to break down. Every successful writer that I know of has this problem in spades. Okay. And so, yeah, anyway, long wandering description of what this book is about. So I was talking about this book, and The book is really interesting in that I started writing the first couple chapters. I wrote the introduction. I think I wrote the first chapter. And then the next chapter didn't, like, that's not what immediately jumped into my mind. I started writing a chapter that was like 60, 70% into the book. So I wrote chapter 1, chapter 2, and then it would be like jumping to chapter 17, you know? And it was completely natural. Like I didn't think anything of it. Like I just started, oh, this is chapter 17. And then the next chapter I wrote ended up being chapter 16. So I started going backward, and then I wrote chapter 15, and then I ended up writing chapter 30. That's how a wandering book works. And a lot of people would be like, "Oh, that's really weird. It's interesting," but I was just kind of following my thought process. Like I literally I was just following what my brain was telling me to write because this book I'm making an argument. Like I'm making a philosophical argument, and I'm laying out how to address the problem. And sometimes that takes you all over the place. And so I would write chapter 16 and then chapter 15, and then I would jump to chapter 8, and then I would jump to chapter 2 and fix some things in chapter 2, and then I would jump to chapter 7. I've been all over the place with the production of this book. But when you look at it when it's done, my hope is that it doesn't feel like it's all over the place. What I think I'm going to end up at is a book that makes, I hope, a pretty cogent argument on what this problem is, how we need to think about it, how we can approach it, what the solutions are, and the things that we need to be demanding of book retailers, of developers, and of ourselves. I mean, that's really what it is. It's actually a very straightforward book, but it just happens to be wandering all over the place. One of the things that I do, I don't outline my books. Normally with nonfiction, I have some sort of an outline, but with this, I don't have any outline at all. I'm just completely writing this nonfiction book into the dark. And what I found about books in general is that most books that you write are fairly straightforward, meaning you sit down and you write them from start to finish. Yeah, that's how it goes. Sometimes those books are more difficult to write than others. There's some books that you write them and then you get stuck, and then you write more and then you get stuck. Some books are harder than others. Some books are impossible to write. Meaning, I shouldn't say impossible, but they're extremely difficult. Meaning they fight you at every turn. It seems like everything you write, it just doesn't feel right, or you get that perfection problem. But these books are usually the most gratifying. So there's straightforward books, there's difficult books, and then there's these books that come along once every dozen or so, and these are the wandering books. And these are books that you write out of order. And this is just my personal experience. Maybe this is not true for you, but one day I think that many of you will come across this if you continue to write. And I've only written a few of these books. And when I say a wandering book, like I said, I wrote it out of order. And this has happened to me with fiction too. So my book, Old Wicked and The Last Dragon Lord, Book 3, I wrote that book completely out of order. Completely out of order. I wrote parts of near the end, almost near the beginning. It was all over the place, and it was a completely satisfying book. My Galaxy Maverick series, my space opera series, I wrote that entire series out of order. I wrote book 2 first, and then I wrote book 1, and then I wrote book 4. No, I wrote book 1, and then I wrote book 3, and then I wrote book 4 and 5, and then on. But the whole thing was out of order. Like it was kind of crazy. Like if you looked at it as I was creating it, you would be like, wait a minute, how are you doing this? But the series was just a wandering series. And the thing about wandering books and wandering series is that they're actually not that hard to write. In terms of like a scale from 1 to 10, in terms of difficulty of writing, they're like a 2 or 3. They usually flow really easily. Emotionally, they can be an 8 or a 9 if you let them. But if you just lean into them and let them take you wherever they go, you'll have a really good time and you'll learn a lot. You'll find that the book will take you places that you didn't think you were going to go. Like when I first started this book, I said I'd be shocked if it was 10,000 words. Now I'm at 15, and it's probably going to be close to 20 by the time I'm done. So it's almost like being on a river. You just kind of let the river take you where you want to go. And you'll know when you have a wandering book, because you'll find that it's easier to write, but you're on this journey and you don't know when it's going to end. But it's fun. Enjoy it, The way I see it, it's kind of like trimming hedges. Like this past weekend, I had to trim the hedges in front of my window, and I've got this electric hedge trimmer, and I was trimming the hedge, but you can't see how even the bush is when you're right up on it. So you've got to trim it to the best of your ability, then you got to stop, and then you got to step back and look at it and see if it's even. And most of the time, the first time, there's some things that you have to fix. So maybe the left side needs a little bit more, the right side, on the bottom needs some more. And so then you go back and you cut, and then you stand back and you get more perspective, and you keep doing that again and again. And at the end, you've got an even bush, but it doesn't feel like that when you're in the middle of it all. And that's kind of like writing a wandering book. So you have to have the ability to push fear aside and enjoy the ride, because before you know it, it'll be over. So anyway, I'm doing this book in one draft. I'll review everything at the end briefly, but after that, it's going to go off to my editor. So I'm writing this wandery book out of order. Going to review it once it's done, and just have faith that that my creative voice took me where I needed to go, and that I get the message across. That takes a lot of faith, and takes a tremendous amount of trust in the process. So one of these days, you folks are going to encounter a wandering book too, and when you do, just enjoy it. Enjoy it, and whatever the emotional struggles are, don't worry about them too much, because it's a once in a generation book. Like I said, I've written over 50, and there's really only been one other novel that's been like this. All right, so kind of cool. It's kind of the fun things you start to see again and again as you write more books. So it's interesting too, because I also find myself in a wandering season in other areas of my life right now too. So in goal setting, in the strategy for my author business, and my personal life, and I think it's just a wandering season, just in time for the leaf to change. So I hope everybody is doing well. I am almost through beast mode, so stay tuned. We're going to be coming up on the end here pretty soon, and beast mode has a plot twist now, because I'm going to be traveling a couple of days next week, I think. Yeah, I think it's next week. So that's going to be interesting. So I'll be sharing more about that, and what I'm doing to keep the beast mode alive while I'm traveling. So stay safe, stay healthy, and I will talk to you next week.
Thanks for joining me this week. If you enjoyed this episode, you'll enjoy my backlist episodes at michaelaran.com/podcast. For your free starter library of my favorite novels, join my fan club by visiting michaelaran.com/fanclub. If you're a writer and want to connect with me further, check out my YouTube channel, Author Level Up, for helpful writing advice at authorlevelup.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back next week.